Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for coming back. Today, we have a very special guest. Her name is Lauren, and she is a business owner of Perspective Event Design, and she's in Canada. She's been running this business for 17 years. First, I want to hear about how you started your business in tandem of becoming a mom.
Well, I'll start with college. Went to college for 2 years and got my applied arts degree or diploma, sorry, and ended up working for a events company in Vancouver. There was many different directions that I could have went, but this one company intrigued me, so I went and tried it out. And I just got addicted, really, to the events themselves, the making a plan to be able to set something up within 6 hours and hoping that that plan actually works out and making decisions on the fly, like the adrenaline rush from that, and then being able to go back at 2 a.m. in the morning to clean everything up and see the huge messes that everyone had made. I worked with a lot of people that were just grumbling and complaining the entire time. And I saw this magic. I was like, we just created a canvas for people to have so much fun. And I'm now
Whoa.
cleaning up after it because they don't have to. There was something that just thrilled me with that. So yeah, I worked in Vancouver for a bit, and then my husband and I were supposed to move to Africa for 2 years. So we ended up coming back to Kelowna to spend some time with family because both of our families were here. And we ended up getting pregnant with our first instead.
You're like, surprise,
Yeah.
plot twist.
So we
I
switched our
love that.
plans.
Okay.
And yeah, I ended up working at Starbucks to be able to get my maternity leave. And after
Wow.
that was up, I was like, no, I want to keep my foot in the door with events. Like, there's no point in me going back and not making enough money just for childcare.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be able to help Tyler with the household income. So it was interesting that the town that we're in, especially back then, it was like it's growing really fast. So it is a big city, but it
Yeah.
still has very much a small town farming mindset. So everybody had their cliques. And every time I would go talk to another events company and try and say, like, I'm stronger than you think I am, I know a decent
Yeah.
amount, I can just help on weekends, they're like, nope, nope, nope. And kind of like, it wasn't necessarily even friendly. Like, it was very much
Wow.
sticking their nose up at me. So
Like dismissive almost?
yeah, it
Yeah.
wasn't, it was really weird and not something I'm used to. So anyways, I just decided to keep my foot in the door and start something on my own, which was super small at the beginning, but it was just a way to do something, to be able to stay in
Yeah.
events for a little bit because I loved it, and hopefully be able to bring in some sort of income.
Yeah. That's a very ballsy move to be like, "Okay, well, you don't want me. I'm in a small town. I'm gonna start my own thing." Like,
Yeah.
it's really badass.
Well, the really funny thing is, like we work really closely with those companies now too. Like,
Wow,
we're
yeah,
much
you're like,
bigger, and we
they
now
just
work
needed
hand
some
in hand
time
with
to
them.
like
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that has to be, like, really satisfying.
It is. Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
also
To be
that I
like,
can
"I told
like,
you," you know?
yeah, yeah, and also
Yeah.
that I can come in with kindness too, right? Like, it's not like I'm
Yeah.
saying that and I'm rubbing
Right.
it in their faces or being super competitive with them. It's like,
Right. It's like, "Hey, I told you I have things to offer. We can work together and, like, build really beautiful events."
exactly.
That's ins So was this your first business that you had built? Like, you were a part of events, you kind of knew the back end of it, and then now you're just like, "All systems go, like, let's just create it, like, on the fly," kind of thing?
Yeah, yeah. I had no prior experience with business whatsoever.
Wow.
My mom's a teacher. My dad is a
Yeah.
surveyor. Like, there's no entrepreneurs in my family whatsoever. So I had never had any sort of inkling to be owning my own business. Completely thought that I'd be working for
Wow.
someone else, working up my ranks. Eventually, like, I definitely innately felt like I wanted to be a mom. Yeah, that's what I always wanted. But if I was working, I was going to be working for someone else.
Mm.
And when I started this, yeah, I didn't think it was necessarily going to be anything big. I was just going to work from home and do a little bit here and there. And then it just continued growing.
Wow.
It was, yeah,
How did
crazy.
you, like, combat, like, the small town mindset or even just a mindset where you're surrounded by people that have different views or a different mindset than you do? Like, how did you navigate that? Did you have other people in your immediate circle that was able to see that with you, or did you, like, listen and follow people that had a different mind? Like, what was your resource, like, in that time, if you could think back?
Yeah, that's an interesting one because honestly, we still kind of come up with that now with some of the business
Yeah.
cases here as we're working with them. But I think I just kept searching for my people.
Mm.
I think the other way that I built the business was through networking, and not necessarily networking events, but I would reach out to wedding planners in town and just say, hey, this is what I'm doing. I might have something
Yeah.
that will be useful to you, and just building relationships that way. And I felt that most of the people that aligned a lot more with what I was trying to do were coming in from out of town and experiencing the same thing. So it was just kind of like building our own
Yeah.
little community. And although we still worked with the ones that had been here for so long, we kind of, we had each other's backs. We're like, let's
Yeah.
push the boundaries here a little bit. Let's,
Okay.
stir
Yeah.
some shit up.
You're like, "All right, I see you, you see me, like, let's do something." Like,
Yeah,
okay, that's exciting. Yeah, you find your people because I think that's, like, a very difficult or, like, a very common thing that we could feel, like, when we feel like we're, don't necessarily belong in the town that we're in or the city, and we, like, look to bigger cities to be like, "Oh, if I was just there, then, then things can I could do that." But I really think, like, even in my experience and now from, like, hearing your own, like, we can cultivate that wherever we are, and it's kind of like giving that an opportunity to be like, "Okay, you can find your community and tribe where you're at if you just kind of not look hard enough, but, like, yeah, be able to put yourself out there and be able to be received by different people." So, yeah,
totally.
I think
Yeah.
that's yeah, yeah. So, how did you start to build like, what was the process of it? I know you said it was just kind of, like, organically word of mouth. Now you have a toddler. And I liked what you had previously said that you had mentioned like the way that you were doing business or the way that you received business advice and you were trying to kind of do that and not be like kind of like authentic in your own expression. And then you're like, wait, this doesn't feel right. I'm going to start talking about the stuff. Like I'm going to say I have a kid.
Yeah.
I think that's just I mean, I think now that is very forward in how people operate now, it's easier that way, but I guess that happened quite a few years ago for you, like, was leading with your own kind of intuition always just a part of how you operated?
I think it was, but I don't think I fully realized it. So
Yeah,
yeah, starting the business, I was trying to take advice from other people because this wasn't something that was natural to me. My husband was big into some of the big sales guys and talking and listening to those audio recordings, videos, whatever they were.
yeah,
Yeah, just a lot of the different business advice. And of course, it like even then was still very male dominated. Like I didn't find a whole
mm,
lot of women business owners, or I guess I just wasn't really in those circles either. Right. So I wasn't
mhm,
hearing like the feminine side of things to be able
mm,
to feel like I could do it with a feminine energy or intention. So I was trying to really take on that male energy to be able to start things.
yeah,
And it just wasn't working. Like one of the things, like I said, that I heard was my clients won't take me seriously if they know that I'm a stay at home mom. So I would like
wow,
put the toddler down to sleep and just hope and pray that she was going to stay asleep during my Zoom call with my meeting and go through it. And then eventually I got to the point I was like, this is stupid. Like I'm not able to serve my client the best way that I can by still having this fear and anxiety that my toddler's going to wake up. Instead,
yeah,
I'm just going to put it out in the open and be like, hey guys, so sorry. Toddler sleeping. She likely will continue sleeping, but just in case I might have to get up and go get her, I'm still here with you. I can still
mm,
do all this, but like this is my reality and this is what I'm working with. And no one ever had an issue with it. Like most of the time, they were actually really excited and hoped that she would wake up so that they could see her on the video call. Like,
Oh my god, that's amazing. Yeah,
yeah,
it's, like, so opposite of what you think that but at the end of the day, like, we're just, like, people connecting with people with business,
yeah,
so it's, like, kind of, like, allowing yourself to be transparent in what you're going through or what, like, life stages is. I'm sure people are like, "Oh, yeah, I relate to that."
yeah.
And so, yeah, that's really interesting. Do you feel like over the years, like, you strengthening that or, like, you being able to operate and be like a strong feminine in business, like how has that been able to like be expressed or how have you seen yourself do things differently than just that experience, you being, yeah, feminine in business rather than what we see so much in the masculine?
Yeah, the biggest thing is just my intuition, and I think that goes a lot
Mm,
back into just who I am and how I naturally operate too. I think I was trying
yeah.
to make a lot of decisions, or maybe I wasn't trying to make decisions, but I was I was feeling less legit or professional because I wasn't necessarily building the big business plans or running all the numbers whenever we were making
Mm.
some new big decision. So I felt like I was setting myself up for failure really by not doing all of these things. Like I'd run a few quick numbers and make sure, talk to people, make sure that these big steps that we were taking were more likely to be able to work out. But I didn't necessarily feel like I was doing the same thing that a lot of others were. And instead it was
Yeah.
like, no, this like my gut feeling, like one of the first big decisions we made, I didn't have a whole lot of items as far as our rental inventory went. And I had a couple wedding planners reach out and say, would you consider bringing in this one type of chair? Which they already reached out to the big rental companies here and they're like, no, 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 we're not bringing anything else new in, which they hadn't brought anything new in for like 10 years. And
Mm.
so they're like, would you consider bringing these in? I was like, oh, I don't know if I can. I don't have storage because I was still storing things in my house. I just wasn't set up for it. I didn't have the money to be able to invest in, it was simply just 150 chairs.
Yeah.
But I just sat with it for a little bit and I was like, I think this is the right decision. And so I went
Wow.
for it. And at that point, I had two kids and was pregnant with my third. And so then I'm going into banks and being like, will you give me $13,000 for 150 chairs? And they're all like, no,
What?
no, we will not.
Oh my
I just
God.
kept going until I found one. And she was like,
Uh-huh.
well, this is a little bit hard, but I think we can make this work. And she was able to get me the funding. And I had those chairs paid off within that one summer. Like they were paid off within a year and I
Wow.
was already making money off of them. So it was like, yeah, going
Wow.
off of that gut feeling, talking to a few people, making sure that everything was good. But and really it was a physical feeling in me that I was like, no, I think this is the right move. And honestly,
This is
those
it.
chairs probably catapulted us to be taken seriously by a lot of other people in the area.
Wow, like set you apart really. Wow, that's insane. So I can only imagine like yeah, leading with your intuition like that is and I like the way you said like the facade or what we feel like we have to be when we're presenting ourselves of like being a professional and what that means like in certain spaces and in the world and even what we've like subconsciously kind of imprinted on ourselves of like, oh, this is what a professional looks like. This is what they do. They have like all the plans and they know exactly why they're doing what they're doing, which is totally opposite of how, yeah, like women just are like, yeah, that feels right.
Yeah,
And I think the more that we're connected to that gut intuition, obviously, like the more we're able to. I've even had this in my life where like it does not make logical sense at all. And you're like, it just, I can't picture myself doing it another way. This has to be the way. And then usually hindsight, you're like, okay, that's why that had happened.
totally.
Wow. So, and so you had said like you had small storage, but like in one of your Instagram videos, you have like a huge warehouse now of like it just kept, I was looking at a tour on your Instagram, one of your employees were doing, and it was
Yeah.
like, I'm like, oh my gosh, you have like massive inventory, massive space. Like, are your events like, do you do huge, mostly weddings or like what are your typical events that you like to do now? And how that has like changed.
Yeah, yeah, we started out with mostly weddings because it was like
Yeah.
we live in kind of the Napa Valley of Canada, like lots of wineries. So
Okay.
summer is just filled with weddings all over the place. So it was
Yeah.
really easy to get into that, and that's kind of where we started.
Okay.
And then as I started working more full time, I was able to make more contacts within the corporate realm. So we're starting to do a lot more corporate events, which
Wow.
feels really good because it's a nice balance. Like I love weddings.
Yeah.
I love being able to help couples not have to worry about the decor, especially with the scale that everyone wants things these days. Like it's at a whole nother
Yeah.
level.
You're
Um,
right. You're like,
um,
it's very now more posh.
yeah, 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 exactly. So yeah, love doing weddings, but it's so nice to have the less emotional side of corporate in
Yeah.
that someone's coming up and they're like, this is the theme, this is our budget, what can you do? And I'm like, sweet, okay, let's
Yeah.
go and
Oh,
like be super
it's like
creative with
straightforward
this.
and yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
yeah,
That it's
yeah,
not like the emotional, like it's the big day, it's my biggest, event and all that kind of stuff. That would,
yeah,
yeah, that feels definitely like an emotional balance for sure.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
That's so cool. What's like do you have a next event or who you're working with that is in the works? Like how does your typical schedule? Because I know you using like Notion now, right? For
Yes.
your like business management. Can you talk about how like how you start to like plan things out and how you've been like navigating with that kind of management? And let's geek out a little bit.
Yeah, that absolutely. I was just gonna say, I don't necessarily have like a project, like an event project I'm working on right now, but
Uh-huh. Okay.
yeah, I'm totally geeking out with Notion, which this is the other thing. I was never an academic as a kid. Like I never loved this sort of stuff. Probably why I never thought that I was going to be an entrepreneur. But now
Yeah.
starting with this stuff, I'm loving business books. I'm loving new
Mm.
systems and protocols and like
Mm.
automations on Notion just get me so excited.
You're like, wow, I didn't know I could be so jazzed about this.
Right? Exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah, so my processes before, especially when it came to design, like we have certain processes for cleaning our rentals, putting them away. That's all pretty simple and automated. But I'm trying to build the business in a way where I have more designers come on so that they can take on the planning of the aesthetics of the entire event, so it's not all on me, because at this point it's been mostly just all in my head, and I'm trying to be able to communicate as best as I can to everyone, this is supposed to be what's happening and this is how we're building this, and it's just not sustainable if you're growing a
Mm.
business, right? So
Yeah.
um yeah, I've been really excited and like taking everything out of my brain and putting it in a customized platform on Notion, so that when a designer
Mm.
takes on a new client, they know all of the different steps that they have to do to be able to get the entire thing done. And I can hop on
Wow.
there at any time to be able to oversee everything that's happening and give them pointers and tips and help that sort of way.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I feel like that feels like a lot of breathing room for you to be able to like be in a space where you're like, okay, I don't have to be in it in the design or be physically there or like mentally there. And I can just kind of pop in and check. And you can just lay out like that format, like you had said. So you can kind of remove yourself from those things like as you continue to build and move forward, which is like exciting because then you feel like you could probably manage your energy and time a little bit differently to where you're like, oh, you have this whole resource, check that out first before you like come to me or before we need to have like all these discussions. So, wow.
Totally. Yeah.
Have you built, because I've dabbled with Notion, but so have you built your own templates and like how did you find Notion? Like, are you like, have you tried other ways to do it? And now this feels like the most easiest or like, what was that process to try to like find?
Yeah, definitely doesn't feel like the easiest, but it was at the
Okay.
point where it was like, and it wasn't necessarily like, I definitely wanted to give myself the breathing space and room and time, but
Yeah.
I also realized that I wasn't giving my team members the ability to be able to own their own stuff. Like I wasn't
Mm.
holding on to things because I didn't want, or like information because I didn't want them to have it. It was I didn't have the knowledge or the skills quite yet to be able to figure out how to pass it on to them. So I
Oh,
knew that
okay.
this was a downfall of my own, and
Yeah.
started looking into just project management software and did a deep dive onto all of the different ones. And there was lots that looked really good, like Asana and all the other ones.
Yeah, I've
And I
heard of that
tested
one,
them
yeah.
out. Yeah, I tested them out a little bit. And then I just happened upon Notion and started watching a few videos and how it could be so customized. And I was like, oh,
Yeah,
yeah, this
this is
one's going
it.
to be a pain in the butt, but I think this one's going to be good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay, cool.
I've been trying to use other people's templates, but I guess it's just the creative and the designer in me where I'm like, this isn't
You're
working.
like, "I
This isn't doing
can't."
exactly what I want.
Right? You're like, "I have to design my own," which just kinda makes sense because like, you literally design your own spaces and stuff, so
Yeah.
wow. How's it been able to, like, grow your team? Because I know you started solo, and then you added your husband works for the business, and how big is your team now? What is it like leading the team? Like, how's that process been, and how has it, like, changed you? Because it has to. Like,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I started and I hired someone before my husband, Ashley. She's on maternity leave right now, but she was like my second brain and
Mm,
amazing. So she came on super slowly on working on things. And then when we went full force and it ended up actually moving into our warehouse and all of the rest of that whole next big step, that's when Tyler came on board. And it was the three of us for a little while there, because that was actually right in the midst of COVID as well. That
Oh,
like that's when we
wow.
moved into our space. So of course we were
Okay.
trying to do everything we could, like on a skeleton crew,
Yeah.
because we were trying to make up all the money we lost.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was the three of us for a good while, and then we kind of like hired a few people here and there to be able to help us with deliveries and things. And now we're at the point that during the winter, during our slow time, we've got six of us, not full time, but there's six of us on the team working through the winter. And then in the summer, we're probably up to anywhere between 15 and 20 people. And that's like full time
Wow.
to casual, because some people jump on just to help us with the setting up and the taking down of events. So
Mhm.
yeah, it was
Okay.
like, now that I say it out loud, that's a pretty big growth for 4 years, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, holy shit. You're like, "Oh, it's casual. It's whatever."
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, wow. Because you're doing I mean, and even from, like, when the jump of, like, doing weddings to, like, corporate events and stuff, and even being able to survive and navigate a period like 2020 where, like, you literally can't be in person and then be able to, like, have, growth from there is just insane, which is just is really cool. How but, like, has it been easy for you to step into that role of, like, being able to guide and lead just from your background and previous experience in events, and you're able to, like, see it and direct people, and that comes naturally? Or has it been, like, a little bit of, like, more speed bumps along the way being able to, like, lead teams?
Oh, yeah, no, definitely more speed bumps. I'm not even in elementary school. I remember my report cards coming home and everyone's being like, she's a really great silent leader. And that doesn't make a great leader like on site when you're supposed to be delegating things.
Okay. So the
Yeah.
delegating part was, like, the new thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm great at leading by example, but that doesn't work when you need to like give people tasks to do.
Actually tell people what to do, right?
Exactly.
You're like, not everybody can follow just on what you do.
Exactly.
Has that, like okay, so what did you do to get there? Like, or is that still a work in progress, or how has that, like, gap have you been able to do that?
Yeah, I think it's like it's been slowly but surely just learning from
Okay.
mistakes as I go. Like looking
Yeah.
back at one of our setups, I would just be like, okay, so what didn't I do? How did I not communicate properly? What do I need
Yeah.
to change? And just slowly working on kind of stepping out and being okay with
Yeah.
simply talking to people, because I'm very much an
Right.
introvert as well. So like the idea
Okay.
of bossing someone around and telling them what to do was just like I would
Yeah.
I would try and just tiptoe around it, right?
Yeah.
And give like really gentle instructions. And now
Baby
exactly like,
bird.
could you do this for me, please?
You're like, "Maybe this would be better."
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And I'd like am slowly getting into it where and I think it's honestly been a lot of really amazing people who have spoken into my life though too, who are saying
Yeah.
like, you know what you're doing. Just
Yeah.
because you're talking to someone firmly doesn't mean you're not saying it with love. A lot
Yeah.
of these things that I felt, and those weren't like deep inherent feelings either. Those were probably feelings that were coming from other outside sources with the way that I was raised, right? And being a woman, you need to
Yeah.
be meek and quiet and all the rest of it.
Yes, palatable and
Yeah, exactly. So that's probably where that was coming from. So I had some other really amazing people speaking into me being like, "No, you're stepping into a leading role. Like you can say this and you can say it firmly with love. And if you don't do that, it's not just a disservice to yourself, but it's also a disservice to them because they're not
mm,
able to learn and grow." And it's funny that as soon as someone puts that, like says it that way, I resonate right away where I'm like, "Oh no,
mm,
I'm hurting
it
them by
lands.
like
Yeah,
not
right,
doing what I need to do."
right. Because then they don't know what they don't know, and so,
Exactly.
like, if you don't share what you know, then it's yeah, exactly, but I resonate with that super deeply, though, because, like, I think it becomes a whole different, like, rework of like the brain and like the way the programming that we get and because I even battle that too of like okay you don't want to like disrupt or be a certain way or like I don't know it's something that is like so deep within like our psyche of our feminine psyche that's there. I think that even for me feels like ancestral, and it's like something where it feels so uncomfortable to like be like, this is even with an opinion. And I have like dealt with this like over the years of like having a very strong opinion and be like, well, I don't know. And then I had my current partner, actually, I said this whole spiel about my opinions, ended it with, oh, I don't know. And he's like, no, you know. And so it's just, it's an interesting thing to observe within yourself when you think like, "Oh, I made it past that hurdle," or like I'm like integrated in this way, and then you're reflected back to be like, oh, there's still a little stuff there that like I'm kind of hiding this or not fully showing up this way, or being very like, yeah, I know this and this is true, and then being able to like anchor that and share that with other people. So it's really weird to navigate in those spaces. But I think when you have like entrepreneurship or like being able to put yourself out there in that way, it's like such a huge growth, huge space where like you're kind of, yeah, shoved out of the nest to be like, okay, how can you survive? Like, let's break some of these patterns that you have in your system that are from you or from the past, you know?
Totally. Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely feel into that of being able to like step through into that different way of being. But yeah,
Yeah.
wow. And then, okay, so I kind of want to segue since we're talking about like the feminine part of you're operating now, being aware, like, okay, we're gonna like switch into like a little spiritual mode, but you're operating in a way that you're working with your moon cycle and like human design. How did you get into that? And how do you like start planning out and navigate business within your cycle and your design? So let's talk about that.
Yeah, yeah. I love talking about this because this has
Okay.
been a huge change just in my entire life, like the way that I schedule my entire life.
Yeah.
And even Tyler, my husband, has been like, it was a huge change for our relationship too, just knowing, like
Okay.
simply just tracking where I was. But anyways, it was through a podcast. It was Jenna Kutcher's Gold Digger
Uh,
podcast.
okay. Yeah, I'm familiar. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. She was interviewing Kate Northrup, and she
Uh-huh.
is the author of a book called Do Less. And she started
Oh,
talking about, yeah, being able to like schedule things on your cycle. And it just
yeah.
really resonated with me. So I bought the book, I read it, and then even after that, started looking more into it and started tracking my cycle, doing more research into what each cycle actually, like what energy that portion of the cycle brings.
Yeah.
And then I started getting into the moon cycle. And the more that I started
Okay.
tracking my cycle then linked up with
Yeah.
the moon cycle, which is totally
So
crazy.
witchy.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Wait, so before you go further, what do you use to track your cycle? Do you have like an app or you just do it naturally, or like what did you start to like learn to like track your cycle and the
Yeah,
women's
I do
cycle?
it a little bit with an app. I have a Garmin watch and it kind of does it for
Okay.
me. So I'll be able to
Okay.
put in like when my menstruation starts and it kind of goes from there and then is able to kind of predict as long as I'm fairly regular
Yeah.
when those different times are going to be. But the other thing I started doing is just a simple journal, like in my day planner, would write down how I was
Mhm.
feeling that day. Like, do I have
Mm.
energy? At the end of the day, I would also then just quickly write down what I got done, what I felt like I
Mm.
was productive with, that sort of thing. So I
Okay.
found that, and I mean, this was kind of told to me through the books and everything that I was
Mhm.
reading as well. But like straight after my period, that's when you have all of this new energy and like the setting
Mhm.
of the goals and super creative, all of that really is high in that week or so. So I will try my best. It doesn't always work, but I will try my
Yeah.
best to do all of my creative work within that week. Or if
Okay.
there's any sort of goal setting or anything that I want to do for the business, it's kind of set in that week and I put that out.
Cool.
And then, of course, while you're ovulating, you're giving out all kinds of pheromones and everything else. And
Yeah.
I realized as I started tracking that, I realized I was so much more of a people person during that week, which makes so much sense. So I'm like,
Yeah.
okay,
Okay.
I'm booking all of my client calls when
Uh-huh.
I'm ovulating, or I'm doing all of my networking when I'm ovulating, because that's when
Yeah.
I feel more like myself and I feel more like talking to people. So I'm
Yeah.
doing less of the walking backwards on my words or feeling like I'm a
Right.
a fake when I'm like networking and talking to
Right. All
people,
the
all
weird
that sort of
emotions
thing.
that come up is
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
every period, you're like, everything I am doing is wrong.
Exactly. And then that week, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to
Yeah.
slowly finish projects up. And
Uh-huh.
then I'm going to wait, finish projects up and just prep myself to, be able to release everything during menstruating and
Yeah.
then start it all over again.
Wow. Okay. So then how's that correlated with like the moon cycle? How do you track? Do you go by like new moon, full moon, and do you do like any rituals around there, or how do you now overlay like the moon with your cycle?
Yeah, I'm just basically watching the moon itself too.
Okay.
So, like, the new moon will happen when I'm menstruating. So, again, that's just like a
Ooh, okay.
recirculating, right? It's a like
Uh-huh.
releasing, letting go. And then typically
Yeah.
the full moon is when I'm ovulating. So, like, the energy is just even stronger and higher during that
Heightened.
week
Yeah.
that I just harness it and use it the best that I can.
Cool. Can you imagine if we like and I'm curious because you had mentioned that do you have one daughter or do you have sons and
Two
daughters?
daughters,
2
yes.
daughters?
16 year
Have you
old,
been able to 16-year-old?
yeah, 16-year-old
Okay.
daughter, 12-year-old boy, 9-year-old daughter.
Okay. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Have you been able? Because I think back to, like, things that I'm, like, learning now, like, in my 30s. I wish I knew, like, so many years ago, like, this would have been so helpful, like, in my 20s or when I first started cycling, and yeah, and so, like, the awareness of this stuff is, like, kinda coming back online for us, and we're seeing all this data of, like, "Oh, wow, this is, like, why I feel this way." This has been a game changer. I've only been working with my cycle for, like, on and off the last 2 years, and I've been off, like, birth control for the last several years, and so that's even been a change and, like, super more clarifying. But I think back, I'm like, I don't have kids, but like when I do have kids, I'd be like, I will be so excited to be able to share this knowledge to be like, hey, this is how you can work with yourself more instead of feel like against yourself because it
totally.
feels so like we're in worlds that are constant in the 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. And it's like the very masculine way to work, masculine way to create, to set the goals, to do the thing. And it's just like, we are just not like that at all. And it feels so satisfying, especially because I did what you also did, like track it was when I was starting to like do regular energy work on myself. And it was part of like this protocol that I was doing where I tracked like how I was feeling emotionally and signs that I would get from guides or like dreams and like track my energy. And I was like, oh, I'll just track my cycle while I do this too. And
Yeah,
then that's when I was finding like, oh, okay, like that week before or like especially 4 days before, you're gonna have really intense self-doubt, mean thoughts, like all these things. And so now I have like awareness of it where like I'll like start to get into like one of those downward spirals and then I'll like wait and then I'll be like what day is it? And then it feels really nice cuz then I know like I look at the calendar and I'm like oh, okay, so it's just going to last a day. Like we don't have to like upheal like updo our life and like nothing's
yep.
going wrong. We could just write out these emotions. You'll be fine in a few days. And
Yeah.
so it gives like such like awareness of like knowing your inner cycles so that you don't like have these like these experiences where you're like oh my gosh like everything's going wrong. But yeah, so have you been able to like have that discussion or have you considered like sharing that with like your daughters of like how you track your cycle and stuff?
Oh yeah, I do all the time. They make fun
Yeah.
of me about all of the stuff that I talk to them about and that, all of the hippie whatever it is that I'm trying to put on
Yeah.
them. And yeah, especially with my 16-year-old, like she's been going to high school for this is her second year now, so it's a little bit more
Okay.
stressful than
Yeah.
kind of like self-navigating her high school courses at home with homeschooling and
Okay.
living up to the teacher's deadlines and all of the rest of this. So she has found it a little bit more stressful. And there's nights where she's trying to work on her homework and get it done. And I'm like,
Mm.
just hold on for a second. Where are you in your cycle? She's like, well, I think
Wow.
I'm about here. I'm like, okay, so just understand that like this is the point where your body is telling you that you're getting ready to rest. And
Wow.
all of these other hormones are going on right now, like just give yourself a break, step away from it for a second and just give yourself a break. And if you can't get it done, like just do your best in the moment that you're in and you will be totally fine, rather than continuing with those feelings of self-doubt and being hard on yourself.
Wow.
Like you
That is
said, it
so
just
powerful,
gives you that
especially
like
as a
weight off your
teenager.
shoulder. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how
Yeah.
it's
Oh
like
my gosh.
totally
How if it
resonating with her, because I'm sure she rolls her eyes at me often, but
she's gonna appreciate it when she's older. She's like, "Oh,
exactly.
thank God mom taught me this."
Yeah, yeah. Thank
They're in
goodness she
that
was so
space anyways
crunchy.
where
Yeah.
they're like, yeah, right. You can't take anything personal at that age.
No, not at all.
Okay, so you had mentioned homeschooling. So like you ran the business and have you homeschooled all of your children like for like up until like high school or how's that been?
Yeah, we've mostly homeschooled. So my oldest, who is
Okay.
now just going through grade 11, we started when she was in grade 2. So she did do kindergarten in grade 1 in a brick and mortar school. And for several reasons, it wasn't working for us. I never thought that I was going to
Yeah.
be, again, never thought that I was going to be a homeschooler. My mom was a teacher. I'm like, no, I'm not doing this. This is
Yeah.
not my thing.
Yeah. You're like
Um,
universe was like, "Yep, well, we have another plan."
exactly. Exactly. Funny thing, everything just kind of fell into place.
Uh-huh.
And then as my other two were getting up to elementary school age, I was like, I don't know. We took it year by year and we're like, we love this,
Yeah.
especially with
Wow.
the business, because I was so busy in the summer. I'm like, if I put them back into a brick and mortar school, I'm never going to see them. Like I don't get to see them during the week. I'm working
Mm.
during the weekends. And then in the summer when they have time off, I'm busy and stressed out. Like this doesn't sound like the
Yeah.
life that I want. So we just continued with it up until, my oldest was in grade 10, because at that point she was able to do something called cross enrollment. So she did some
Hmm.
courses at
Okay.
home and some courses at the high school, because she still had some friends there and she wanted to try it out. Um, and she's really happy there. So she's now doing high school full time. And then the other two kept deciding to stay at home. They would like
Wow.
we'd relook at this every year, and every year they're like, no, I think I want to go to school. And I'd ask them their reasons. They're like, well, we'd like to take the bus. And I'm like, okay, let's look at this realistically. um, First of all, you guys don't get dressed during the day, so you're going to
Right.
have to get dressed every day, and you're going to have to actually get up in the morning. So let's practice this for a week and see if you guys like it. So we would practice for a week with them getting
Smart.
up every single morning to be able to actually get on the bus and go to school. And they're like, no, we're not doing this.
You're like, "Hard no."
Yeah,
You're like, "Yeah."
exactly. I'm like, perfect. I hate
That's
making
so
school
great.
lunches, so
Yeah, right. You're like, "This is a win-win."
yeah, yeah,
That's amazing. I think because like, yeah, I think the structure of like homeschool is just like super fascinating. I would have loved that, I think, as a kid, and I would love to be able to do that at least part of the time if my future kids would want that also, because I feel like it's such a more integrated way that you can like move as a family and a unit, and it
yeah,
makes sense with your schedule of like being busy in the summer, you're kind of off season in the winter, even where you're able to support if you need. And yeah, I just think that's really cool that you're able to like make that part of a discussion with your kids. If like you do you want this, like how are you feeling, and then like okay, let's try it on. And I don't know what it is about the freaking school bus, but I remember saying to my mom of like because she was able to drive us to school, and I like there was a period of time when I don't know how old I was, maybe in high school or something or middle school, and I really wanted to ride the school bus. I was upset that she was able to take me to school.
yeah.
And she used to be picked on the bus. The bus for her back in the day was like so trauma triggering. Like, and so the fact that I wanted to take the bus, she's like, you don't know what happens on the school bus. And I was like, no, I think it's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
So it's so weird what as kids I'm like, what is it with the school bus?
I
I
mean,
just
a
think it's
large
funny.
vehicle, it's yellow. I feel like maybe just
Right.
the
It
image
seems
itself brings joy. Yeah.
right. What's that? What was that cartoon? Like the Magic School Bus or
Oh,
something? And maybe that has to do
yes.
with it too back in the day. But that's
Yeah.
so funny. Uh, okay, so I wanted to talk about your psilocybin journey and like your spiritual journey of how this has like kind of changed over the years. Because I know you mentioned, did both you and your husband do this together, or were they like separate journeys? Or
No, very separate. I did mine about a year and a half ago, not this last September, but the September before.
okay,
So it's been a year and a half of like work and downloads and everything since then. And then Tyler's was actually only last weekend. So we're like
wow,
still living off
okay,
of the high and everything that he's feeling right now from last
yeah,
weekend. Yeah, we felt
wow,
like, because we've done so much together. Like this July, we'll
Mhm.
have been married for 19 years, together for
Wow.
21.
Okay.
And also just growing up in conservative Christianity, that brings a whole nother
Yeah.
like
So fun.
aspect to yeah, being a couple, that there's a lot of things that we're like, no, I think we need to do this
Yeah.
individually. Like we need to
Wow.
come back into our own individual personalities because
Yeah.
we haven't done that for so long. So yeah, we thought it was really important that
Whoa.
we owned it. We both did our own journeys. And then at some point we'll
Okay.
do one together for sure.
Together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was it like facilitated by a facilitator? Was it guided? Was it like a solo? I'm just gonna take some mushrooms and do my own thing? Or like how is like let's talk about yours, I guess, because I would, let's
Yeah.
start there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was guided by, I don't think she necessarily considers herself an energy healer. She does have some experience
Mhm.
with Reiki, but she has been working with Psilocybin for a few years now after having her own journey, actually.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
and because it's still not like it's it's not illegal, but not completely
Right. It's like
legal. So there's like
a
some
weird
little
space.
things, yeah, that
Right.
we kind of have to step around.
Mhm.
But anyways, yeah, she just worked with me for, we had like 3 sessions beforehand, just over Zoom, talking about
Mhm.
intentions, what was going on with my life, what I wanted to get out of the ceremony. And at that point, I wasn't sure what I wanted to get out of it. I was like, I don't
Mm.
know. I feel called to this. I feel like there's something that needs to be said to me. And I'm just intrigued as to what this would do. So went into it, and yeah, it was just the most
Mm.
crazy, beautiful experience I had
Mm.
ever had. And I've always been
How
a
yeah.
spiritual person. So I've
Okay.
always felt connected to God. At that point was what was being taught to me. Couldn't explain things, but I was like, there has to be a creator. Like I just feel it innately that
Yeah.
there's a creator of some sort. So then as soon as I went into it, I had already kind of been breaking down my faith a few years before that. But going into it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is my space. This is where I am.
Yeah. Wow.
Um, it was, I mean, as sure as I'm sure as you know too, like when Tyler came back from his, he was trying to explain his, he's like, I was in my body, but I wasn't in my body, and I felt my hem. I didn't feel like all of these things. I'm like, no, I get it. Like there's no way that you can fully
Yeah.
describe what
Yeah.
goes
Yeah.
on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But the like short of it was just a being enveloped in like a full feminine energy. And it was like
Mm.
a community of women, whoever was there, but it was fully feminine. And I was just being told, like, it's okay. You can rest now.
Mm.
We have you.
Oh,
Just rest. And it was gorgeous.
wow. Full body chills right now as you're
Yeah.
describing that.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So, okay. So for the ceremony, how did you feel like I guess, like, how did you find her to start working with? Like, how did you think about wanting to do a journey? Was it, like, calling out to you? Did you hear other people's stories with it? Because that's what like, different medicines that I've worked with has happened that way, where it's like it kinda is just, like, in your awareness, and then you kinda just, like, find somebody, and then the opportunity just comes about. It's just like I feel like the medicine really, like, draws to you, and then it
Yes.
just, like, nags at you until you actually come work with it. Has that
Yes.
been your experience?
Oh
Okay.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
so it was quite a few years ago that both
Yeah.
Tyler and I were using cannabis, and that I feel like in itself just changed even our relationship. Like
Wow.
before going into arguments, sometimes we're like, "I'm feeling heated. Let's go just smoke a little bit. We'll come back." And then we were
Mm.
actually able to have a conversation and like listen to each other rather
Wow.
than having an argument. So that was kind of my introduction into plant medicines themselves.
Okay.
So that it was quite a few years of that. And then actually the studio that we moved into for our warehouse and everything, right beside us was a cannabis marketing company, and we started becoming really good
Ah,
friends with them. And it's been really cool going on kind of the journey with our neighbor there. So the guy that owns the cannabis marketing company, he was getting into a lot of the different plant medicines, and in a very different way. Like he was into it when he was younger, of course, in a very social
right.
aspect, but he was
Just like
making the
a
transition.
right.
Exactly,
Like a different
exactly.
intention.
Exactly.
Different
And
reason why
was
you're taking them.
exactly. And so he was slowly
Uh,
getting into it for the actual like healing portion. So he was able to share with
yeah.
us all of the different things that he was experiencing, and that's what was bringing us into it. And then he was
Okay.
also, yeah, teaching us kind of the science behind it and what's happening with all of
Yeah.
these different medicines. And even just like, instead of calling them drugs, calling them medicines was just a
Yeah.
huge shift
Right.
too, right?
Huge mental
Um,
shift. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And yeah, so he was actually the one who found um, my guide. He did a ceremony with her and then talked to us about his
Mm.
ceremony, and it just like completely pulled me in. I was like, oh my gosh, this, yeah, this is
Yeah.
my next thing. And
Your full body.
same
Yes.
thing, I
Yeah.
kept putting it off. I was like, no, I don't have the time right
Mm.
now. Like, I want to be able to make the space. But it just kept calling and calling and calling. I was like, okay, I guess I have to do this like in the middle of wedding season. So went and did
Yeah.
it.
You're
And it was
like,
just so worth it on the time that we did it. And then he was the one
wow.
who guided Tyler just last weekend.
Wow. Oh, I'm excited to see what comes about with him. So, what are like the bigger like ahas you had, or like, because I had worked with the medicine of ayahuasca this past summer for the first time, and I think this applies to psilocybin too. But I really liked the way that my facilitator talked about it, where he's like, you think that your journey is like the day that you like take the medicine, and people think like that's the day, that's the journey. And he's like, really, that's like ground zero. Like the journey
Mm-hmm.
hasn't even started. It's like kind of like you're opening the door of like the medicine being able to work in your life. And I just like the way that he described it, I was like, holy shit. Okay. So I'm curious, like, and this is what happened in my experience with psilocybin too, is like you have this really epic journey and all these things happened, but it opens the door, and then journey starts life after you had the experience with the medicine. So like, how has it been able, like, what's your biggest things where it's like, okay, this has changed? Because you had said that you had kind of divine downloads and insights that had happened over the last few years. Is there anything that kind of stands out that you want to share?
Yeah, I can't think of like a specific anything, but it's like it's
Mm,
definitely consistent downloads, and
mm,
it's it's hard to explain exactly what it is, but it's like it's a thought that you have in your head, and then all of a sudden it turns into like a physical feeling. Like it's a
mm,
weight on you, and you're like, no, this is truth. And you have no
mm.
reason, no actual proof as to why this is the truth right now, but it just is. It's like this overwhelming feeling. So there's just been little moments here and there where I have a thought in my
Okay.
head, and then all of a sudden, yeah, it just feels like a full energy moving through my body, where it's
Yeah.
like, this is what you have to do. And then when I realize that that's what happened, it's always really related back to my journey. It's like it's the
Yeah.
slowing down. It's the, you
Yeah.
need to make this
Okay.
change because this is going to make more space in your life. You need to make more
Mm,
change because this is going to deepen your relationship with your kids.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
a whole bunch of little things
Powerful.
like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
More like integrate. And I felt that too, because it was a way for me to, and I didn't really know at the beginning when I did one of my first journeys of like how powerful of a medicine it was. And I was like, yeah, okay. Like I was learning about the way it worked with your brain and the neural pathways, and kind of like learning about what mushrooms do in nature and what they're able to do for us and all that kind of stuff was like really insightful. But I think what, even in my experiences, being able to like have something where you have a very visceral physical experience while you're in the journey of like you had spoke about, where he's like, you're in a body. Like I had the same thing happen where I was like above my body, in nothingness, like in source, like back to source, reabsorbed, having this whole experience, and then like look back down, like see myself in the body, and then I'm like, whoa, that's me down there. And then coming back into the body and be like, whoa, look at my arms and my legs. And it's just like, so it's like these like really trippy things that can happen. But it's like in that experience, you have that like physical, visceral experience where you have access to that now outside of the journey. So I can
Hmm.
very like, if I'm, overwhelmed, or I'm thinking about all these different things, or you're really in like the matrix of stuff where you're
Yeah,
like the day-to-day life, I can take a moment and be like, okay, wait, like we get to be in this body right now. Like we're experiencing, and then it gives you kind of like the zoom in and zoom out experience that I've felt in my life, where you can access those emotions and those feelings like in that journey, and then it just continues to like play out in your life over and over,
totally. Yeah.
which like is really like a really beautiful thing, where I think more people are starting to kind of be open about
Yeah.
and experience with. And it'll be very cool to see like how your guys' relationship continue to like change and morph and stuff,
Yeah.
like through those journeys.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
about
I'm excited.
the way that you had said like breaking down your faith?
Mhm.
That's such a powerful statement. Can you just like talk about that? Like different
Yeah.
practices. I know you got into like meditation, and how has it been able to like, it sounds like you have a really strong body intuition, like your body's able to guide you. How's that experience been out of like deprogramming that, yeah, the faith and having a different, belief system or more expanded maybe?
Mhm.
What of your different practices or connections have you used outside of that journey?
Yeah. I feel like it's similar. The practices are similar to what I did before within the church, like
Mm,
praying, taking time for yourself, all that sort of thing. And it's just kind of shifted. Like the breaking down of
mm,
our faith was interesting in that like I don't think I never lost faith in spirit, source,
mm.
and what I called then God, right? Like there was
Yeah.
always that relationship there. So it was an interesting
Okay.
thing where we were all of a sudden within ourselves, we were all of a sudden allowed to ask questions and be like, hold on, why were we told this? And
Okay.
why is it this way? And
Yeah.
instead listen to ourselves and how we felt about certain things.
Yeah.
And also it was really freeing to when you started asking those questions and realize that you didn't actually have the answers, like the Bible didn't hold all of these answers that we were told it
Right.
held. We're like, I feel freer not
Mm,
knowing anything, not
mm,
having any sort of idea as to what the truth actually is. I feel way better not knowing
mm,
all of
mm.
this stuff. And so that was kind of like that middle ground of breaking down my faith and then going into my new spirituality, I guess. And I still feel
Mm.
like I'm still very new with a lot of it,
Yeah.
as well as I think I also just tread very lightly with some of it too. Like I'm being invited to a lot of different, say, moon circles or whatever it
Yeah.
is. And I just have to kind of like sit back and hold myself a little bit and be like, is this something I actually want to step into? I think it's sometimes a little bit triggering where I'm like, I think I
Mm.
just need to sit in this space and just feel what I feel and meditate and connect to spirit the way that I feel I need to right now and
Mm.
still be in this space of not knowing, and it leaves me
Yeah.
open to learn more, I think. So, yeah,
Wow.
meditation,
That's powerful. Okay.
yin yoga has been really big, like actually stretching my body and feeling those
Mhm.
emotions being released that are held within my different muscle areas. Oracle cards, tarot readings. One of my good friends is a really amazing coach and tarot reader. So I'll often go to her and just not necessarily
Amazing.
get
Yeah.
answers, but just like feel this extra tool of connection
Yeah.
to whatever it is that I might need to learn.
Cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kinda like a little, like, pulse check. You can use these different things to be like, usually you innately already know, which I think that's you're already anchoring into that. Because I think when like, at least when I started, like, on my spiritual journey, it was just, like, sticking my head wherever I could figure out any kinda answers. Because like,
Yeah.
I liked the way you said, it was able to give space for your questions, because I wasn't necessarily raised Christian. We went in and out of church, but it wasn't very like, it was a very loose kind of thing, but it was like really like predominantly when I was like in high school, and where you're having all those thoughts and questions, and in a lot of the spaces that I was in when I had a lot of questions, because I like to ask a lot of questions. It's like just like within my nature, like I'm just curious. And so a lot of the questions that I had weren't really met receptively. Like, well, this is the answer. And I'm like, well, why?
Mhm.
Or like, well, why isn't it this? Or like, why do you say that? But then you do that. And then that doesn't match up. And so like, obviously that doesn't really go over very well. And so that led me down my own like, path, which is really interesting. But I like that you take a step back and you like check in with yourself. And what I've been receiving a lot, like within this last couple months, is like digestion time. I keep
Yeah.
on hearing from like my guides, where it's like, okay, you can have all these experiences, you can go to these places, you can learn this information, you have this perspective or whatever, but it's like, are you digesting it and like really being able to process all of it and see how you feel through it. So I feel like having that space to really check in with yourself to be like, okay, yeah, this is really exciting. Maybe one day I'll want to do this, but like right now it doesn't really feel great.
Yeah.
But it's easy when you start getting into it that you like want to be a part of everything. Cause like I also have like FOMO with that. You're like, I want to be in this and that and that.
Yeah.
But that can be really overloading to the system, especially when you're like, in that new learning the relationship with your intuition and stuff like that. So I think that's really beautiful that you're like, okay, let me just check in. But then, yeah, you have just tools that you can use to like almost mirror back of what you already innately know. Like
Yeah.
usually in my readings, my oracle reading is like, I already kind of know. And then like you hear the cards and you're like, okay, like, just like confirming.
Exactly. We're just like the teenagers now being like, okay, I get it.
Like you do turn back into a little teenager, like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this is so wonderful. What kind of meditations do you like to do? Is it just like music or guided or
Yeah, mostly just music. I think
yeah,
maybe it's just because of my busy life too, and having three
yeah,
kids, like just being able to
right.
sit in silence and
Yeah,
just let those thoughts pass through my brain and not have to interact with them just feels so
yeah.
good. Yeah.
Ugh, cool. Very cool. Okay, I want to kind of end with this kind of question because I love that how you described that you've like designed this life for like you and your family, and it feels really good or like organic. So if you have like if someone's listening and you're like, okay, I want to have a family, or I have a family and I'd love to cultivate this feeling within my life. Like, do you have any like kind of like tips or advice for somebody that wants to kind of cultivate this, what you would offer somebody to be able to like, okay, this really opened up the way that I do things or how I navigate within this system. Because as I look to building a container, which is like a family, like it's really refreshing to hear stories and experiences from people like you that have cultivated this within your guys' dynamic. And yeah, I just wanted to ask if you have anything else to share related to that on how like you can kind of kickstart that.
Oh, that's such a good question. And like just meets me right here. I'm like, yes, yes.
It's you in the heart.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I feel like, yeah, it just goes back to your intuition. I feel like I
Mm,
tell some new moms this too. I'm like, no one, and this is actually advice that I got from my mom and I loved it. And she's given it to other moms too. She's like,
mm,
only you know what's best for you and your family. So just go back to who you are and what you want and what feels right in the moment. Like just because
yeah.
you my mind just goes back to a moment where I was like in the thick of it with toddlers and there was another
Mm,
family in need. And I was like, I feel so bad that I can't make these meals to be able to drop off or be able to help them. And it feels like so much to be able to take this on right now. And even my mom in that moment was like, that's not your job right now. You need to go
mm,
back to what you need to do, what feels good to you, and be in your moment. And I feel like that's
mm,
just, I keep trying to remind myself that every day when I'm too hard on myself for anything that I haven't accomplished or that we're not doing. It's like now's just not the time. Like
yeah.
enjoy where you are and make the decisions that you feel that you need to make with confidence and contentment.
Wow. Okay. That's a pretty great landing point there.
Oh,
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us in this conversation. I
yeah.
super appreciate. I think this is going to hit a lot of people and there's just so much goodness in here. I super value your experience and your time to be able to share with us on the show and it's just been such a great chat.
Yeah, thank you so much for having
Yeah.
me and also for having these awesome conversations. There's just so fun to listen to and I love being able to hear
Mm.
other people's stories too. So thanks for having the platform for it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you. You're welcome. And then I'm going to link everything in the show notes. But where can people find you to connect with you, your website, if they're curious about your events or even just want to follow along with your journey? Where can people go for that?
Yeah, so my personal Instagram is Lauren Perspective. I always forget what this is, either Perspective Lauren or Lauren Perspective. And then our business one is Perspective Event Design. That's the
Okay.
biggest platform we're on right now. We'll hopefully be
Cool.
expanding, or even just our website, perspectiveeventdesign.com. And feel free to send me an email. I'm happy to connect with anyone and be able to like share experiences and create community to be able to encourage everyone to just living their best lives.
I love that. I think the more that even with your your ending note of being able to tap into your intuition and trust that and be able to live from that place. We've been super disconnected from that for a long time and the way that we navigate through life and just in general. So it's I think just that little reminder of being like, yeah, only you know, which is just such a beautiful way to operate and be like, just trust yourself. You
Yeah.
got yourself, you know? Yeah. Oh, amazing. All right. Thank you so much. Give her a follow, you guys. I'll put everything in the show notes so it's easy for you to click. And until then, I'll see you in the next episode.